Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today here is another series of My World of Astrology. And, I thank you guys for listening to these because I still notice that they are the least popular, but because of your comments saying that you have enjoyed these, I'm keeping it going. So today I wanted to talk about some of my experiences as a flight attendant, again, of what I endured with people I flew with. Oh my gosh. So between the pilots and the flight attendants, I had to put up with so very much. And like I said, word got around that I was an astrologer because I would sometimes do readings for girls, on the fly, on the airplane, especially when I felt like they needed it. But ever so often, I flew with very religious flight attendants. And back in the 80s, it was like everyone was going to Bible study and the Bible, taking it verbatim, everything that it said. And, there's so many interpretations of the Bible, so many translations. It's thousands of years old. And I believe most of it's symbolic. Absolutely, it's symbolic. But a lot of people want to take it literally. And oh my God, I would get into all these arguments with flight attendants. It was miserable. And you know what? I would have all of the religious, quotes and things and how it proved astrology. I would go wild with all this astrology and the Bible stuff. Well, the more I thought about it, the more I kept attracting, every time I went to work, born-again Christians, really strict by religions, and a lot of the religions were so extreme. I think they're cults personally, but to each his own. They probably thought I was, worse with a cult being an astrologer, right? So one thing I would say to those that would really, really go after me, I would say, we are so much alike. And they would say, what are you talking about? And I'd say, we are both so adamantly strong in our beliefs. And they still wouldn't get it when I said that, but I meant that, that we're both very, very strong in what we believe, and that's why we were going at it. But, I remember one flight attendant sitting on the jump seat, and she was going on about Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve, all these stories for some reason. Don't tell me why I had to listen to all that. But I just kind of looked at her and I said, do you really and truly believe that every single person on this planet came from Adam and Eve? She said, yes. And I thought, it's symbolic. The whole apple and snake thing about, the Garden of, it was all symbolic. I don't want to even go into all the symbology that makes so much sense that what it's depicting is, about many of the evils here on earth, but it was symbolic. So, and then when she started in with the Noah's Ark thing, and I looked at her and I said, so you really think that there was this boat that a man built, that he got 2 of every creature on earth, including insects. It said that. Elephants, giraffes, tigers, foxes, raccoons, every single living creature. Supposedly, Noah got on his ark. And everyone survived. They were the only ones that survived, so therefore they replanted into the earth. I'm sorry, somehow that's very symbolic. It could not have literally happened. So I kind of told her that. She got really upset with me. So I just, rolled my eyes and went to the back of the plane. Get me away. I'm not participating in this anymore. There's no winning with people like that. And there's no winning me over to save me. So anyway, that was that. But I'll tell you, I was flying with some of these people one time, and it was the day that Mercury turned retrograde. And I said, today Mercury turns retrograde, and of course they're rolling their eyes at me. And I said, we're going to have a major mechanical or a weather concern that we are not going to get through this day without a major hiccup. Something big will happen. And they're like, yeah, right. So I remember we flew to Baltimore that night, and we got into a storm weather that was so extreme. All the planes were grounded in Baltimore. I mean, we were on an AM trip, and we were grounded for 8 hours because every time they tried to de-ice the planes, it was so cold and so freezing that the ice would appear again on the planes. So nobody could go anywhere. Finally, they came to the back. I knew that there was going to be something like this. I brought my computer with a whole book that I needed to edit. And so they weren't boarding anyone on the plane, so we had the empty plane to ourselves. And I sat there, I got so much work done. It didn't bother me a bit, but it sure bothered the other crew members because we weren't going anywhere and they had nothing to do. They were freaking out. What do I do? They're running out into the airport to get food and wait. This is 8 hours delayed. And I finished editing my entire book because I brought that knowing that we were going to have delays like that, because that was the day Mercury stationed to go retrograde. And then they finally came to the back. When is it going to be over? When is this going to happen? They finally believed me because I predicted it at the very beginning of our day. And I think I even noticed at the beginning of the flight what aspects were going on, that we were not going to have a normal day and that there was going to be major delays and setbacks. But I brought all the material to work on. It was great. Didn't bother me a bit. So that's one story about the Mercury retrograde. And I always knew, and I always told people, and they usually made fun of me till it happened. And then they still didn't give me the credit it was worth, but still, I'll never forget flying with this particular pilot. And he always put me down and looked upon me as an idiot. Why? Because when we did have ground time, I would go to the back of the plane, and I always had my astrology books. I was always reading astrology and learning as much as I could, or either doing some writing or reading a book. I made it a practice that every 3-day trip I went on, I read a book. And I brought sometimes more than one. So I was constantly learning, and I was in the back lounge on the plane, and I was reading my astrology books. And he comes to the back and he looks at my books and he goes, "You are so weird." And I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "Reading those books, they're weird." And I said, and by the way, if pilots ever did bother me, I usually would tell them I'm an astrologer. And they would look at me like I was really weird, and they usually ran away. And if they didn't, and I wanted them to run away, I'd say, "And I'm a Vedic astrologer." And they go, "A what?" And I would tell them what it is, the astrology from India. They would always leave me alone. It's like, if I ever wanted them to leave me alone, I told them I was an astrologer, a Vedic astrologer. And they ran the other direction quickly. But This particular pilot was a born-again Christian, very much into the Bible. And he said, those books are weird. I read the real book. And I said, oh, is that so? What do you mean the real book? I read the Bible, he said to me. And I said, oh, really? Well, I've read that book, yeah. And, you know, I didn't go much into it because I was kind of consumed in reading, and I didn't want to have that conversation with him. So we're on an entire 3-day trip together. And I'll never forget, we had an overnight in Reno, Nevada. And that morning we had to be for the crew van outside by about 4 o'clock in the morning. Something ridiculous, like usually we had to get up so early. And I remember it was the time that Hale-Bopp comet, you could see it. It was like this really bright thing. And in Reno, it's kind of up in the mountains a little bit and really dark outside. You could see all the stars. It was phenomenal. And I'm standing there and I'm talking to the driver, and we were pointing at it, talking about Hale-Bopp and all that stuff. And this pilot comes around the corner and he goes, "You are so weird. That is so stupid." Because we were talking about the comet. And I remember the day before, I forgot to include this. We were walking, you know, because we were with each other the whole 3-day trip. We were walking in the airport, and he was making fun of me with blonde jokes. You know, that I was an idiot and I was stupid, using this scenario of the blonde jokes, implying me being dumb. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, I'm not dumb. Little does he know. And so he has me all sized up. But when he started in on me about that comet, it made my blood boil. I had had enough. I was up to here with his insults and putting me down and telling me basically I'm stupid and I'm dumb blonde. And I got into that crew van. It was early morning. Everyone was half asleep and my blood is boiling. I couldn't contain myself. And I said, you know that book that you said you read, the Bible? I said, I read that book too. And there was nowhere in that book where it says you need to put other people down to feel better about yourself. I let him have it. And everybody in the group kind of woke up and were like all sitting stiff. And I just lit into him about his Bible and how he wasn't practicing anything that was in the Bible by constantly berating me and putting me down and trying to make me feel like I'm stupid and dumb. So anyway, I'd finished. I said my piece. I was boiling. I was so angry. You know how when you get that angry, you're shaking? I was shaking. So we get off, continue, cool down, do my day. Do you want to know something? At the end of the day, he came up to me and he apologized profusely. He says, "You're right. I did put you down. And you were right. That is not part of the Bible." I couldn't believe it. But you know what? He got it. And sometimes we need to finally just stand up for ourselves and who we are and what we believe. Maybe I shouldn't have been that angry, but I couldn't help it. My blood was boiling. I was shaking. I was so tired of being put down. But he got it. So you know what? He did follow his Christian values. And he learned a lesson, and I learned a lesson. So that was kind of an interesting day, and my day of the ridicule that I got for being an astrologer, especially out there in the conservative world. Hey, it really prompted me to have my own school and to bring people together where we could talk astrology. Because heaven knows I couldn't talk it anywhere in my normal conservative workplace. Yeah, those were the days. I'm so glad I don't have to contend with that. Now I have my own school and I get to talk astrology, or people that come to me with readings. They love astrology. I get to talk my language and no more of this contentious ignorance being thrown at me. So with that, I think I'll close. I hope you enjoyed this session from My World of Astrology. Thank you.